So today, our program features a facilitated panel discussion focused on the anti-LGBTQIA plus bills moving through the state legislature. The panel will be facilitated by our executive director, Amy Jacobson, here at Prairie Action. So I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
All right. Thank you, Sydney, and thank you to everybody for being here this morning on this breezy, cold spring morning. We're having we want to welcome you, all of you, to this very critical conversation that's happening here in our state about the legislative challenges facing the LGBTQ plus community here in North Dakota. And today we're joined by really an incredible panel of advocates who do a lot of work here in our state, especially during this time of the year, to defend people's human rights. Today we'll have with us Faye Seidler, who is a suicide prevention advocate, especially in LGBTQ plus populations. Also Allison Trainer with the National Association of Social Workers, North Dakota. Christina Sanborn, who is an attorney and is the legislative liaison for the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition, and Cody Schuler, who is with the ACLU of North Dakota. Together, they're going to share some of their insights from being at the legislature on really what's going on with these legislative attacks, the impacts they're having on the communities, and how we as a collective can continue to keep up the pressure and to see additional defeats of these very bad bills. So I'm going to ask right now that each of our panelists just briefly introduce themselves, their organization, and a little bit about their advocacy work. And Faye, we're going to start with you.
All right, fantastic. Hi, my name's Faye. As you heard earlier, I do suicide prevention work. I'm a suicide prevention advocate. I don't belong to an organization. I'm unique in the work, and that is mostly volunteer advocacy, which is good because you can't disrupt my funding in case a lot of stuff gets cut, as we've been seeing. So I will be doing this work for my life in any way that I can. The reason I got into this work, the reason that I'm doing this work is I'm a survivor of suicide myself, and I want to make sure that no kid gets to the point where they feel so hopeless that that becomes an option for them. So everything I do is to build hope and to inspire people and to connect them to resources and communities so they feel safer, better about their lives, and feel like they can make it to tomorrow. So that's what motivates me in the work, in my fight, and the reason that I do it, and will be doing it for the rest of my life. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Faye. Allison, can we get you to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Allison Trainer. I'm the president of the North Dakota chapter of the North Dakota Association of Social Workers. I'm also a therapist. I work as a mental health and trauma therapist at YouthWorks, where I serve primarily trafficked youth, as well as respond to crisis for youth and families, primarily surrounding suicide. For the last 16 years, I've been a social worker working in tribal and rural communities, Spirit Lake, Turtle Mountain, Devil's Lake, and the region surrounding Bismarck, Mandan, and primarily focusing on suicide crisis and personal crimes, responding to those pieces. And I've also was a state suicide prevention director for 5 years and co-founded the North Dakota Suicide Prevention Coalition, where certainly serving LGBTQ plus, and as Faye Seidler has been really our foremost leader in that area in North Dakota. Thank you so much. So I've been working on some legislative pieces as they come up. As you know, as a provider working in crisis, it is challenging to be there. And so I appreciate the panelists and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate your work here in North Dakota. Christina, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Sambor. I'm an attorney in North Dakota. I have my own law practice. I also have been, for the second session now, the legislative coordinator for the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition. I'm a proud YouthWorks alumni and have worked historically in North Dakota. I've kind of bounced back and forth in between just doing attorney stuff and then also working in really collaborative space within the nonprofit sector. And so that work for me really started back in 2015 when I worked with Cause, the domestic violence programs, and YouthWorks on developing a statewide strategy to identify, serve, and prosecute human trafficking, serve victims of human trafficking, survivors of human trafficking, and and assist law enforcement in developing more trauma-informed responses to trafficking victims when the crime is investigated. Um, so in that regard, I've lobbied at the legislative session now for 10 years. This is my 6th session. And at the legislature, I have advocated primarily for vulnerable youth, unhoused populations, the LGBTQ plus community, reproductive rights. So in that role, I've had the good fortune to work with Cody, both in the unhoused work and now in the human rights work. And so yeah, it's always an adventure being at the legislature. And I wanted to thank Amy and Prairie Action. I'm really excited to be here today, and they're a wonderful partner and do so much work to keep everyone in the state not only aware of what's going on, but also how to engage. And so, and then I also want to give a shout out to Dalton Erickson, the ED of the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition. It's always a pleasure to work with them. And they did some really great work this week in mobilizing people to come to Bismarck on one of the bills we'll talk about later. So, and also I would just like everyone to know that I have a vicious combo of really bad allergies and 2 corgi puppies who bark at me every time I have allergies. So they may make an appearance over here to my right. So anyway, thank you, Amy, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Christina. Eagerly waiting the corgis to show up today.
I hope they come. They just freak out every time I sneeze, and I've been sneezing all morning. So I just wanted to let everybody know that they may jump in over here. So
thank you. And then last but certainly not least, our final panelist that we'll be hearing from during the duration of this morning is Cody Schuler. Cody, could you take a few minutes to share your background with everybody here today?
You bet. Good morning, everyone. And Amy, echo the thanks from everyone else as well. Cody Schuler with ACLU of North Dakota. And my background is particularly in this lobbying space. It goes back all the way to, I think, not quite as long as Christina, but 2017, where I started doing housing lobbying for the North Dakota Coalition for Homeless People while I was working for the North Dakota or working for the Fargo-Moorhead Coalition to End Homelessness, and so was doing that until joining the ACLU in 2022. And the American Civil Liberties Union, we are nonprofit and nonpartisan, and we work most famously in the courts, but also in the legislatures, legislature as well as communities across the state, with our main mission to defend and preserve the individual rights and liberties that are protected by the Constitution and the laws of North Dakota, and that are guaranteed to everyone in this country. And so my work as advocacy manager is to really, as the title says, manage the advocacy work for the state and on behalf of ACLU North Dakota as well as ACLU National. And that means we do a community organizing, a public education. I am the registered lobbyist for ACLU here in the state of North Dakota. And so we are just doing whatever we can to protect and defend constitutional rights. And as you can imagine, that list is really long. And so it's really fun on days like this where we get to focus just on one of those areas. And obviously the work that we've been doing with LGBTQ rights in the last couple of sessions, along with the North Dakota Human Rights Council or Coalition, et cetera, is been a main focus of what we're doing. So I'm glad to be here today with you all.
Thank you, Cody. And thank you to all of our panelists. You bring a wealth of information, advocacy, and background that I'm sure everybody here today is very eager to hear about. So we're going to jump right into the questions that we had for panelists today. We're going to start with Christina. The question that we had for you to kick off the panel is that North Dakota has really seen an influx of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in recent years. What are the most urgent bills that you're fighting this session, or that we're all fighting this session, and what would their passage mean for the LGBTQ plus individuals and families in our state?
Sure, thanks, Amy. So I'll say 2 things kind of in starting, one of which is 2023 was a really difficult session for the community as well. And so what we saw in 2023 was a real large focus on targeting the trans community, in particular trans youth in North Dakota, and really a lot of legislation that targeted systemic responses and tried to limit schools' ability to respect the identities of trans youth, to limit families' abilities to access medical care. And so this, I think is an important backdrop for where we're at in 2025, because there was so many of those laws that passed last session. One thing I forgot to mention is that I'm also the attorney of record in North Dakota. So I serve as local counsel on both the gender affirming care case and on the abortion ban case. And so, in between 2023 and 2025, I've been a part of the team that's really been digging into a lot of the details that underlie and prove the discriminatory nature of these laws. And by that, I mean, we knew this last session, we know this session, and we've seen it over and over again in the lawsuit, that there's just no facts, no reasons, right? No reasons you can really point to justify and substantiate a lot of these laws that they're passing. That also goes for the gay marriage resolution. These things have been litigated in courts where you can't show up and just rely on your feelings and your prejudices. You have to actually show evidence that restrictions in our law are necessary. And we've just really seen, not that it surprises anybody on our side of things, that there just is a total lack of necessity for this attack, and in particular on the trans community. So I say all of that just kind of as background to say that, a lot of the stuff that we see in 2025, I would say, aside from the gay marriage resolution, has been sort of an extension of things that started in 2023. And so specifically, House Bill 1144, which I will put a link in the chat here for you all. So this is a link to the PDF of the actual bill. If you want to take a look at what the language actually is, you can go ahead and take a look at that, and I'll just sort of walk through what these bills are. Sorry, my screen, of course, is giving me a bad time right now. Okay, so 1144, and if you have the link pulled up, what's important to know about these bills is that everything in here means something. And so when you look at this, you'll see under the numbers, so you'll see on line 7 down the left side, there's numbers. On line 7, there's 15.106-21. What that means is that the parts of this text here on line 7 and under that are not underlined are already part of the law. They're things that passed last session, which is why I kind of bring up the 2023 session. The things that are underlined are changes that are being proposed to that law in the 2025 session. So you can see what I mean by 2025 is really building on a lot of the terrible work that was done in 2023. And by terrible work, I don't mean by the advocates, I mean by the legislature when they were passing these types of things. So for some background on 1144, this law that was passed last session was really to try to limit schools' ability to accommodate transgender students' needs in school. And that goes to bathroom usage and to pronoun usage. And so you'll see there on line 9, subsection 1, that previously the law has been that a school board, public school, or teacher may not adopt a policy that requires or prohibits an individual from using a student's preferred gender pronoun. They're trying to expand that now to move beyond a policy, which would be kind of a more formal written instruction, to also prohibiting any guidelines, whether implicit or explicit. And what that means is if there is an unwritten sort of way in which a school board or a principal or a superintendent is encouraging employees to address this issue, that it's also trying to prohibit that any school district in the state would be able to tell everyone you have to use someone's pronoun. The sort of compromise that came up last session was that this bill doesn't require it, but it also doesn't, you can't require it, you also can't prohibit it. So you also can't tell somebody you may not, right? You may not approach this in a singular way. Now, of course, when you think about the child's experience or the youth's experience in school, if you're going from one class to another and people are referring to you, some people are dead naming you, some people are using your preferred pronoun or name or things like that, that can be a really difficult situation for them in terms of experience, having a good experience at school. The next part in this bill, if you go down to line 17, subsection 4, this is really a really good example of really bad policy that just is bending over backwards to try to solve a problem that doesn't exist. So what it's prohibiting here is that schools may not create a restroom or shower room that is non-gendered. They must be designated exclusively for males or females. They may only be used by that sex, and that multi-stall or multi-room gender-neutral restrooms and showers are prohibited. that a restroom for males and females may not be located together with a communal sink or communal area where students enter and exit a stall or room. So there's been sort of a trend to create bathrooms where there's like what they call closet style bathrooms, where when you actually go into like the toilet area, it's like a separate little closet area where it completely closes off from the rest of the space. And then when you're finished and you come out there, there's a sink there that anyone can use. But all of that space is non-gendered, right? Which is like, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But they're actually trying to prohibit that type of construction in schools. There is in dealing with some of the problems that's brought up, there is an exemption to some degree for existing construction, but that is how they're trying to manage bathroom usage. And then again, going down to the second page, line 1, again, that expansion from policy to guidelines, whether implicit or explicit, about a transgender student status. So meaning a school could not have sort of an unwritten policy or agreement that they're not going to out a trans student to parents, even if potentially the students are saying, here's the reasons I don't want the school to talk to my parents about this. And then the last 5 sections here are an enforcement mechanism. So one of the things that's really chapped the rear ends of some of the legislators that are really diehard in passing these anti-trans bills is that they felt like there wasn't adequate enforcement mechanisms. And so this essentially tasks the Attorney General's office with investigating these complaints. Now, the Attorney General's office has come forward in the initial hearing on the bill and really opposed this because of the workload it would create. And so I won't go into too much detail. If people have questions, we can talk through that, but essentially just knowing that the next portion of it is really an enforcement mechanism. I'm going to skip over to 1430, which is another bill I know that a lot of folks are interested in. And then I've just put the link down here again with the link to the actual legislation. And I also want to note that Faye popped.
Christina,
go ahead.
This is Amy.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I'm gonna just jump in right now, and I'm gonna thank you for walking through that bill first. But we're gonna ask more questions, and we'll circle back. So if it's okay, I want to appreciate the backdrop that you provided, the history from the last legislative and walking through that bill was very helpful. And now that we're kind of looking at that bill, the next question was actually going to be directed towards Faye, and just asking Faye, like many of the bills, the ones that Christina just highlighted and others, that are targeting transgender youth, include restrictions on pronouns, on bathrooms, and on even basic hygiene, like we were hearing about in that bill, in schools. Can you break down how these bills function really as a tool of exclusion and control? I'd like to hear a little bit about that from you, Faye.
Yeah, and I think I love the groundwork that Christina laid for this, because I remember in 2015 we fought for anti-discrimination protections at the Capitol, and what we were told, like it was an enormous effort to get that done, was we can't dictate culture through law. And I see the reverse happening right now, where all of these bills are nonsense. They're trying to dictate a cultural and ideological belief about the world to exclude trans individuals from it. So a lot of the laws that are attempting to be passed are weird spaghetti language that can sort of fit into the law, but doesn't really, because the law doesn't like to be exclusionary like that. So what we have is a bunch of laws that are really from a minority group of individuals who dislike trans people for ideological, prejudicial, different reasons. They all come to these bills with different beliefs and different backgrounds in the cultures of our state, but ultimately what they do is they make the state less safe for trans people to exist in it. And when I think about suicide prevention, and I think about culture, and I think about how trans kids are doing, it is really scary for them to basically be going to school as kids right now. They are 12, 14, 15, 17, and they are having that like sword of Damocles over their head, just being like, what is going to happen and how is my life going to get worse from these? And I think one of the disconnects we have is at the Capitol, we have professionals and lawmakers who kind of have armchair philosophical discussions about rights or where people belong in, the safety of those halls. But for the trans kids, like the impact it has on them in their life makes it so hard for them to get help and so hard for them to have hope. So a lot of these bills, even if they fail, even if we are, defeating them, still have a huge cultural impact on making life a little bit worse for the LG plus individuals that are here and just trying to live. So for me, when I think about these bills and I think about them being, bad or good or what they might do or not, I think about like our queer youth are already not doing well. They were not doing well before the 2023 session. They're not doing well after the 2023 session. And I think it's telling that we constantly see these bills that micromanage culture and divide trans or queer people out of it. But there's never that like bit of help or hope that we give them. Like, even if we believe this is a rights about who can use bathrooms, well, we know trans students are not doing well with support or mental health help. Where are the bills that are helping our queer individuals or our queer mental health? Because we know it's the thing, we have the data on it, but there's never that approach. It's always really just that one-sided, like, devastation for our trans and queer youth. So the last point I just want to make about that is I think when we think about the response, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but to touch on it for just a second, it's not just the bills that we have to defeat or fight. It is the culture that we have to continue to improve through the conversations we have in efforts like Fighting 3013 do so much for building hope that even though that bill came forward and we all felt awful about it, just kind of crippling fear, that now that we beat it, we feel so much euphoria from that. We feel like we can move forward as a state and heal. So every bill is the chance to have another fight within this culture to show that we can show the people of our state they deserve love and hope, opportunity, and access. So these bills try to import kind of a very specific cultural way of understanding the world that we then kind of fight back against. So that's my answer there.
Thank you, Faye. And actually, it's a very nice transition in some ways to the next question, which is, talking about like mental health, but now like from the ideology of the opposition, in some ways, we are seeing this conversion therapy bill. So this question is for Allison with the social workers, is that, conversion therapy remains a very serious threat to LGBTQ plus youth. And can you share a little information about the effort that's currently happening in North Dakota to allow for conversion therapy and what's at stake for people? And then additionally, if you could add on to that, just note it was noted this week that the United States Supreme Court intends to pick up and hear a challenge to conversion therapy bans for minors. So if you could integrate that a little bit into your answer too, we'd be really interested to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Amy. So in 2021, the social workers, the Board of Social Workers in North Dakota examiners had provided very clear guidance that conversion therapy, providing therapy to change the gender identity, to change the sexual orientation of anyone, a youth or adult, was an ethical violation. And in 2023, to kind of springboard off of what Christina was discussing, legislation was brought forward to reverse that and to say it would not be an ethical violation, and that was defeated. Now again, in this legislative session, Representative Winkleman has brought forward yet another bill with a little bit more slippery language and framing it as though it's a protection of social workers so that they can provide therapy that aligns with biological sex. And it was very clear in her testimony, it is very clear the intention of the bill is to allow conversion therapy and to make it accessible across the state of North Dakota at the request of families, parents, and is incredibly harmful to youth. And then I testified as, of course, the president of NASW, but also as a clinician that's been working and serving youth at risk of suicide for 16 years. Of course, the LGBTQ plus population are disproportionately represented among those folks, not because of their identity, orientation, but because of the rejection, because of the prejudice, because of policies like these that harm them. And that conversion therapy has repeatedly been shown to cause very negative health outcomes, fourfold increases in suicide. We've seen, there's study after study that show the millions of dollars that it costs to try to support people after this. The effect of this mistreatment and this abuse is far reaching. It impacts my clients. And that's why it has been shown through every mental health organization that I'm aware of that it is an ethical violation. So testifying on in opposition to this, we have seen, some efforts to change the language. Winkleman was very clear that any effort to soften the language defeated the purpose of the bill, which in fact is to provide conversion therapy to youth and adults in North Dakota. Right now, I feel like testimony and conversations with the chair and the Human Service Committee has been going well. The discussion is really how we can kill this bill. It's so very harmful.
Thank you for sharing that, Alvin. It is incredibly harmful bill, and it is making its way through the legislature right now. We are putting information in the chat for people, and there will be actions at the end that can help people continue the fight on all of these bills. So thank you for sharing and how dangerous these bills really are to people. Something I don't know that everybody always is paying attention to. But it does kind of transition us a bit to our next question, which is for Cody. And Cody, we're seeing when we talk about these bills at the legislature, there's always a little bit of interest around who are the key players, like both inside and outside of the legislature. Where are these bills coming from? Who's pushing these anti-LGBTQ plus policies? And what patterns do we see in their strategies or their endgame? Can you share your thoughts on that, Cody?
Yeah. So first of all, kind of go through just sort of a list of some of the people that we see or the organizations that we see, particularly this year. Probably we don't have enough time to sort of go through the whole, history of some of these movements, but sort of what we're just seeing currently in the moment is, first of all, the anti-marriage resolution, really, or anti-queer marriage resolution was authored by an organization called Mass Resistance. MASS is not just for the word mass, but also because it's based in Massachusetts, and that's where they began. They are a pro-family organization, and they have had this bill introduced in a number of states, including Idaho, South Dakota. South Dakota defeated it as well. And so they're the ones who actually crafted that language. If you spend a little time on their website, you'll see that they really are just a very, I would say, a very dangerous organization in the rhetoric that they use. They are also named by GLAAD as well as the Southern Poverty Law Center, usually labeled as a hate group. And they go real deep, and they promote some of the terminology that we oftentimes hear around, what's normal. For instance, the headlines around when this resolution passed in the House was that normalcy ruled the day, despite a gay legislator. They use quotations in all these different ways, and then I'm now adopting to use that as well to talk about how they talk about things. But so they would be one of the principal folks that are really pushing this from the outside. Their executive director spoke remotely by the invitation of the bill sponsor on Wednesday, and or on Tuesday, and it was wild. I mean, it was one of the most hateful, crazy rhetorical moves I've ever seen in a committee in all the years working in the legislature, and that says something. It was pretty crazy. So that's kind of that they would be the one national org right now that really is pushing particularly that. As far as the rest of those things, there are usually a local and a national connection. So we see the North Dakota Family Alliance, for instance, being the North Dakota connection for the family policy organization, focus on the family. Let's see, I wrote down a couple here, make sure the Family Research Council, the Alliance Defending Freedom, also referred to oftentimes as ADF. These are those national organizations that are usually behind a lot of this work and pushing it, and they are all connected to the North Dakota Family Alliance. And so we see them having a local movement, so they have got a local person on the ground, but then they also help facilitate with a lot of these bills, bringing in on remote testimony these experts on pornography or a variety of things whatever the agenda is. If it's book banning, it's whatever the issue is. Usually the LGBT issue is undergirding all of it, and then they are bringing their piece to it. And so these legislators, our local legislators who are working with them, having sponsored these bills, our local organizations, they're then inviting them in. And so you're getting a lot of outside organizations, everything from like family and marriage counselors who are licensed with whatever a credential from some of these different organizations from neighboring states and that kind of thing, because we don't have any of those, or they don't have we don't have a local person in North Dakota that can offer that. And so then what we're seeing is they'll beam them in on these videos or on live testimony streaming. And so I would also name, while I can't vouch for like being behind some of the things, but definitely a usual suspect in the room whenever the Family Alliance is there, or North Dakota Family Alliance is there, the North Dakota Catholic Conference is there, lobbying on behalf of the two dioceses in North Dakota. And so we usually see them upon all these, and I will reserve a number of comments about that because they've been a part of a lot of movements in the past, but now have shown up in this particular space. And then as far as basically, I would name 4 legislators. There's other legislators, but I would name 4 who are really out there that we see, and you can just, any of these bills, you look on the bill and you see who signs on to them. Those are your folks, because if they put their name on it, that means they're for it. But as far as those where we've seen primary sponsorship or the loudest voices would be Senator Clemens from West Fargo, Representative Tveit, he's from Hazen, Representative Van Winkle, who's already been mentioned, from Minot, and then Senator Boehm from Mandan. Those are the 4 that we've seen introduce everything from book bans to the conversion therapy issue, to any sort of anti-queer pieces. I would say that Senator Clemens really comes to the top, not so much from bill sponsorship, but serving on the House and Human Services Committee will be the one who will ask the questions and really defend that. Again, he's not alone, but he's become one of those voices for that. And so those are sort of the 4s. And then I'll quickly, because I know I'm about at my time, but wanted to make sure too that the ACLU, the North Dakota Interfaith Alliance, such a great group of faith leaders across the state who are stepping up to fill that, I would say, more progressive voice against this this faith movement that's on the anti-side. I would say, obviously, ACLU, the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition, and then Forward 701 is a newer network that basically is trying to bring together all of the local pride organizations and provide those groups that are, doing a great job of planning drag shows and planning pride celebrations, whatever, and trying to make sure that their local activism and advocacy voices are being pulled together into a central place. And so we all work together in that broader coalition. And then lastly, I'm just going to give a quick shout out, particularly in the conversion bill hearing the other day. First of all, Allison, you were amazing. And then second of all, a big shout outs to Representative Lee from Senator Lee from West Fargo, as well as Senator Roars from Fargo, who both really took Representative Van Winkle to task. And so that's some video worth watching if anyone needs a little highlight for your week.
Cody, thank you for shedding some light on that. And I think that's of particular importance. There was a lot of chat I saw going on, people wanting to know a little bit more about how people were voting. I think that's probably a little bit in light of this week's vote, which was done in darkness, where we didn't get to see how people were voting on the anti-marriage equality bill. So just for everybody tuning in, we will continue to drop information in the chat, how you can reach Cody, how you can reach Faye. Faye has a wonderful article that she put, and all of our people, so that you can continue to make those contacts and know that while we might not always have all of those recorded, we sure have a good number, and it's very easy to find out who our arch nemesis are, as well as those people who are working with national organizations to try to use North Dakota as a testing ground for hate. So stay tuned and make sure to connect with those folks. We have so much of information to share, but trying to keep it into this 1 hour. But thank you for shedding light on that, Cody. It's very important. And we're going to transition just a little bit of today's conversation now from what's some of the bills, and moving a little bit into what the community can do. What are the community actions and support that is needed to make sure that we defeat the rest of these hateful bills that are still making their way through the legislative session. So the next question was really either, Cody or Allison, either of you want to kind of jump in on, but what can community members do right now to push back against all of these bills? Like, are there specific actions, testimony, outreach, organizing? What's going to make the biggest difference in your perspective?
Allison, go ahead first.
Absolutely. I think it's not as important exactly what it is. It's just that you're doing something. All of us have different capabilities, different mobility, different positions, and different experiences that we can call upon. So certainly don't let the best possible option, get away from a really good option. Email your legislators, send in testimony, even if it's written. If you do have experience, if you have an identity, if you have something that gives you credibility to stand in front of the legislature and to testify in person, absolutely do so. Um, it, and then talking about it, sharing your experience if you have experience in something. A lot of the folks that are weighing in and that are some of our lawmakers do not have any direct experience in some of these areas. They just, or no one feels safe to disclose to them that they have no experience to call upon. And so the more we talk about our experiences, the more we are brave and share our stories, this really is about narrative, knowledge, and eliminating ignorance. So
I love that answer, Allison. Thank you. Like, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Do what you can with the resources that you have, and don't be fearful. The other side often is jumping in without, feeling like they're experts in the field. So every voice is important. Cody, is there anything that you would add right now as a specific call to action?
Yeah, so Allison, that was a great job. I would just add to say that just a couple of tips and tricks. First of all, follow organizations like ACLU, North Dakota Human Rights Coalition, Amy, to make sure to sign on to Prairie Action. If you're here today, you're probably already on their list. But what happens is a lot of these organizations we will put out sometimes collaboratively, sometimes individually. We will put out calls to action, and there will be an opportunity for you and give instructions, or it's an education around what to do to respond. And so it gives a real opportunity for citizens to be able to know how to connect. It makes it really easy. So you can go in, you can click and send an email, and it's going to go all to the right people. And now sometimes we hear legislators say, oh, when we get all these, they all come in, they're all the same, whatever, and they ignore them. Some of them do a head count, right? And they're like, okay, I know these all came from the same place, but we're going to tally up. So they really can make a difference. Amy has experimented with this, and I think everyone else should as well, about really taking the time to write something that's personal rather than using what's standard stock in the thing. I mean, if you don't have time, click and send. That's fantastic. Your voice has been heard because it's been, it's among the masses. But also to take that time to use those forms to really write your own personal stories and such that Allison was saying. And so I would add that piece to it just to make sure that we're doing that. And then the last part I would just say before turning it back to you, Amy, is I had one part of your earlier question was also what are the strategies, et cetera. Something I didn't say that I think applies here is we're seeing the work that was done for years to overturn Roe in the reproductive freedom spaces. That is now the playbook that's being used. So what a topic for a different day would be, though, that all of the things that they used for over 20 to 30 years to arrive at their place to overturn Roe, this is the exact same playbook that is now being used. Last session, we saw the quote unquote, what I call low hanging fruit, like, well, let's target trans individuals because it seems to be easy. It's an easy target. But next we're going to go for marriage. And no one believed me last session when I said it. They're going to come for marriage next session. No, that'll never happen. And then look what happened, what we just did this week. So we know their playbook. And so we also then know how to build the responses. But basically all of you, as Allison said, pay attention, talk to your neighbors, but then also look for opportunities to take action.
Thank you, Cody. The next question really plays off of a lot of what Allison shared earlier about just how dangerous these bills are to people's mental health and to their lives. So the question is, for those who are feeling overwhelmed by this wave of attacks, what kind of advice do you have for staying engaged and hopeful in this fight, or how can people help to take care of themselves as they resist? I'm going to start the question to Faye.
Hi. So most of my work is being hopeful, right? And not blind hope, because it is the hope that you earn by the work that you do. And that's how we create hope and resiliency, is trying to make the world a better place. One of the things that gives me a lot of hope is I know a lot of history of the LG plus movements. And I think about the 50s, the 80s, I think about the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and I think about where we were decades ago. And as all this stuff seems really scary today, it is actually pretty normal cultural growing pains, because a lot of people are pretty new to what it is to be trans. And we think about where we were with gay identity and gay rights in the 1980s compared to today, we're kind of on the same trajectory for our trans and queer youth and individuals. The thing that gives me hope constantly, the thing that centers me in all of this, that allows me to keep waking up every day, is here's the truth of the world today. And that is, there are more parents who love their trans and queer kid today than that has ever been in all of our history. When I grew up in North Dakota in the 1990s and early 2000s, you didn't have that opportunity. You didn't have that chance. You were lucky if you were lucky to be able to get anywhere or get any resources. So the fact that I see parents talk about how proud they are of their trans kid is life changing. We've never had that. And when I talk about how these laws are trying to dictate a culture that's moved on from them, it's that. We have so many kids right now having really difficult conversations with their parents that change hearts and change minds, and that's how we change culture. So the thing that I would say for anyone here about the big things we can do, these laws suck. We can fight them. We fight them everywhere we can. But the things that save lives is the kids in your life. Tell them you'll love them no matter who they are. Like, have that hard conversation at home with your nieces and nephews and kids. Like, talk to their parents first. Otherwise, like, don't be too much family dynamics and drama with that. But like, look out for the kids in your life because we need them to grow up. And when they grow up in a world of love, then we're going to see a much different legislator set or legislation 10 years from now or 20 years from now, and we're going to get over today. Whatever happens today is not forever, and we will keep on moving forward in these conversations. And that's also probably my positivity, so I'll let everyone else go for the rest of the questions.
Oh, thank you, Faye. That actually is the great pivot too. So we're kind of wrapping up our conversation right now with the panel, but we don't want to, and there's a lot of work to be done and we're going to share a lot more with you. But I would like to hear from each of the panelists in your, like a kind of in a little short synopsis. Like there are a lot of bright spots as this is happening. Yeah, it's very dark. There's a lot of attacks, but we sure are seeing people step up and do their own thing or join together and fight. And so would you each just take a minute or two to share with us, something that has been a bright spot in the fight that you've seen? Either that could be promising legislation or strong allies who are stepping up, local victories. What is it that you would like people to know that is a bit of hope as we exit this panel discussion today? And I think I'll start with Christina.
Sure. Just to quickly double back to the what advice for staying engaged. Just pick a handful of people you trust, both on the state and national level, and just keep up with them. So I think Prairie Action's a great resource to keep up with, and Faye as well, on what's going on in the state. And then I would say Heather Cox Richardson is somebody I always push on the national level. So she has a daily, pretty lengthy summary of something that's going on. And then she also provides historical context. You can find her on Facebook and also on Apple Podcasts. But I've been encouraging people a lot that that's a good place. And then her source is a lot of independent journalists. So I'll say those two things. As far as a bright spot, this past week in one of the education-related hearings, which I put some information in the chat about, the 2104, 2105, and 2244, which are really trying to force schools into compliance with a lot of these culture war bills. The North Dakota Family Alliance lobbyist, who Cody mentioned, is really one of the state vectors for a lot of these national hate groups, mentioned that he couldn't find a single health provider in North Dakota that had complied with the bill last session that required showing a video, a pro-life video, and anti-abortion video on fetal development across the state. Nobody had done it. And I think that, and I know that that's in the repro space, but what I would say is, what we know is there are good, caring people across the state in these systems, in the education system, that actively resist by ignoring this and doing the right thing. And so we know there are great GSA advisors, there are great teachers, et cetera. And that's a big bright spot for me.
I love that. Thank you, Christina. How about you, Allison? What's your bright spots?
Well, I want to springboard off of some things that have been mentioned. Certainly, in House Bill 1430, Shirley was incredibly inspirational, and it was really exciting to kind of see that dialogue. But certainly the youth that I serve, the fact that the conversations, the Q space planning, the advocacy that's taking place among youth, that just how active they are, and how vocal and how brave a lot of the folks that I have the privilege to work with are. Thank you.
And Faye, I know that you did share hope, but is there any like one nugget of something that you saw recently of an individual or organization that was a bright spot for you?
Well, I mean, I think like very obviously, we were able to defeat the attack on marriage equality, and I think that we had Kylie Overson and a lot of other people put that letter together of 1,000 different individuals across our state, really showcasing how much people, will actually stand up for us. And I think it's important to think about also our national image because most people think North Dakota is you don't want to go there. Like that's our cultural perception if you're part of the LG plus community. But this really plants a seed of hope, and I think one thing I really want to make cognizant here is it's never one person, right? Like a lot of us do a lot of this, but it is all of us together that really make this change. So I think that it was Austin Foss having that really passionate floor speech that gave so many people so much more courage to step up when they wouldn't have otherwise. And I think it was all of us taking that trajectory and continuing to go forward with it. So you can look at all these little moments where so many different people stepped up at the right time to be where we are today, and that's all of life. And you can contribute to that no matter who you are. You don't have to be a high level activist. You don't have to, be a lobbyist or anything like that. A single parent can make that change too. We can all rise up to that, and it all contributes into something meaningful. So I want you all to know you're part of this too. In every way, those little actions matter. So that whole thing is great, right?
1,000%. Every individual action is coming together to make change in North Dakota. And I do want to give Cody the opportunity to also close out with his one bright spot that he's seen during this fight this
Well,
session.
yeah, I think Tuesday, Wednesday was just a bright spot. And this, I mean, there's so many other things that I can mention. You all have mentioned some great ones, but I think to see the number of people that showed up at the Capitol, there have been years in which we've had to have the queer community, show up to advocate for themselves, and it's been scary. It feels a little less scary these days. It seemed like, and we showed up. They had to accommodate with having a separate room for us because the room's not big enough, and to hear those um, hear everyone being able to willing to tell their voices was just really a bright spot for me to and to be with those folks in the Capitol, to see folks the next day show up for the vote, like they came early, they were eating lunch, they're getting ready to go up in the gallery, and just to see everyone showing up was great. And then I just want to give a big shout out then. It is always disappointing when we feel like our queer community has to be the ones advocating for themselves, but at the same time, it's also a huge bright spot where we have three openly gay legislators, two in the Senate and one in the House, and that they've all spoken, they've all advocated for not just their constituents of all persuasions, but for the queer community. And Austin speaking, Josh speaking the other day, and all the work that Ryan has done as well, asking good questions on the Judiciary Committee for that hearing. So big shout out to them because they are so wonderful on the front lines. And I think what's so important is that they are queer colleagues to the people that we've listed, right? And so these are the people they have to walk past in the hallway. Like the rest of us who show up at the Capitol and citizens who show up, that's really important. But those elected officials representing the queer community, they're colleagues of these individuals, and they basically put our concerns in front of them every day and make it human. And so I just have to give a big shout out to them because they're the ones that have to go and do that every day, even more than we as lobbyists do. So big shout out to them.
I'm going to thank you all. I'm going to first say that I'm going to take 1 second as a point of privilege here. And we have a very hateful person in our chat right now. We've been trying to remove them and we're not able to do that. So I do want to apologize to everybody who's been reading the comments by that individual. They will not be allowed in this space any longer, and they are not welcome and their words are hateful. So I just wanted to put that out there first, and I apologize for anybody who had to read that garbage. Now, I do want to transition on and just say that I don't want that to take away from those moments of hope. This has been a very powerful week in defeating some very dangerous bills, and we know we have more to come. We know we are stronger together, and that we will continue to defeat the pronoun bill, the bathroom bill, the conversion therapy bill. We will defeat those together. Every individual, like Hope said, like Faye said, gives hope. And we are going to make sure to make a difference and make sure that our communities are protected and that our children get a chance to live and thrive in our state without hate. So speaking of other things, we do want to transition. We're hitting the end of our time, and we do want to respect everybody's hour. So I want to thank our panelists for being here this morning. I know you've had a lot of busy weeks, and this is just another thing to add to your calendar, but your voice and your experience and your words are important to everybody who is here today. So thank you for making that time and for being here today. And then I also want to thank everybody for making time to show up and be in this space together. But we do want to close out on some ways that you can continue to keep the ball moving forward. So I'm going to give the last remaining 4 minutes over to Sydney Stock. She's our digital communication organizer here at Prairie Action, and she's going to share just a few of the ways that you can continue to make a difference in North Dakota. Sydney.
Hi, you guys. Okay, so this is going to be super rapid fire, some action alerts that you all can take and get involved in. First of all, we have a volunteer opportunity here at here at Prairie Action, which is North Dakota Megaphone, and this is a volunteer program where you can engage digitally and post messages like the ones that we've been talking about today, action alerts and things like that to your own social media. So there's a sign up link in the chat. Next, I just want a quick rapid fire through some action alerts that revolve around school vouchers on House Bill 2400 and House Bill 1540. So if any of those are of concern to you like they are to us, obviously very important. Those are some actions you can take from North Dakota United. Next up, you can take action and send a letter to your state senators urging them to pass a policy for free school meals for all North Dakota youth. I am going to drop that action in the chat. I told you these were going to be rapid fire, so if you're still here and paying attention, I appreciate it. Next up, from the North Dakota AFL-CIO, if you are in Fargo or Bismarck or the surrounding areas and you care about the United States Postal Service, as you should, you can attend these 2 separate rallies to say hell no to dismantling the USPS. And support those unions. And if you now are curious about those action alerts that we had mentioned on House Bill 1144 and House Bill 1181, you can send letters to state senators and urge them to vote no on both of those. So that is kind of an all-encompassing alert. And then finally, we have some right to read anti-censorship, like protecting librarians, protecting the freedom to read here in North Dakota. Some action alerts, all 3 of those that I just put in the chat, all do similar things. They'll be emailing House representatives about Senate Bill 2307, which just threatens to harm the right to read, librarians, freedom of knowledge and everything like that. Very critical, as Vicky also mentioned in the chat. And then, I'm just going to mention our self-managed abortion safe and supported trainings. If you're interested in joining us next Thursday for an info session. So I just want to thank you all so much again to the speakers this morning, not just for taking time out of their Saturday, but for being tireless advocates and for all of your incredible efforts so far this session and for making North Dakota a better place. And with that, we're right at 11 o'clock. So I am going to bid you all a good day and stay warm today. We'll get you guys a recap soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.